talk about getting your message together here. First thing you want to do is you want to come up with, what do you want to say? All right? Who do you need to reach, and what do you want to say? So remember, you're trying to reach the audience through this intermediate step called the medium. But think about it this way as you start to approach this piece of research that you've done. If you were going to write the headline, what would you want it to say? Start there. Because remember now, you're trying to take your 200 pages, which you turned into an abstract, and now Kent's going to tell you that you've got to do something impossible with this. And that's turn it into 2 sentences at the most that you can say in 10 to 15 seconds. That's it. That's your hardest task right there. I'm giving you the hardest task. Take that entire body of work, boil it down, 2 sentences, and you better be able to rattle them off in 10 to 15 seconds. It can be done. It has to be done. And here's why. Let's dissect a television news piece. Can be 2 minutes long. Could only be 1 minute and 30 seconds long. What's that piece going to look like? Journalist says, here I am at Michigan State University because we've just heard of this great research on blah, 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 blah. You talking. 10 seconds. Some cool shots in the laboratory with the journalist saying, in the laboratory they did da, 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 da. Another shot of the laboratory, another shot of the laboratory. Another person who benefits from this research. This is great stuff they're doing at MSU. Okay? Back to you for 5 more seconds. The journalist says, and that's all we have for today from Michigan State University. End. You've got 2 little pieces in there, and that's all you're going to get. So you've got to make sure that the most important thing that comes out of your mouth first is the message that you want to be the headline and the thing that makes it into the video TV piece or into the written piece. If you don't, it won't. You give them a big pile of stuff, they're going to dig through there to find a something. Odds are it's going to be the wrong something. Make it easy for them. Okay? Make it easy for them and be quotable. Some things to think about. You got to boil it down. Don't make them drink out of the fire hose like this kid's trying to do. Okay? You got to boil it down. The key messages are your foundations to everything else you're going to talk about. Because those are your points you're going to come back to. You start with your top one. I'll give you a second one. I'll give you no more than 3. And that's all you get. And they should be in priority order. Shouldn't say number 2 first and then number 3. Number 1 should be the first thing out of your mouth, then 2, and then 3. Now, you might be thinking, well, Kent, what if their question doesn't lead me to the opportunity to just hit them with that number 1? The chances are, in most cases, you'll get that opportunity. Okay, so let's think back to the journalist scenario that I gave you. The first question you are frequently going to get would be, whether you've scheduled this interview and pitched it or not, or if they just showed up and called you because they heard about it. The first question is going to be, hey, well, tell me a little bit about your research you're doing here and what's going on. Open invitation for you to nail them with your wonderful talking point that you've got that summarizes the whole thing. Now, why do they ask that question? Sometimes they ask that question because they want you to start them off here. Let's get this thing rolling, and they'll think of questions along the way. Sometimes what that question really means is, I haven't done a lick of homework, so tell me why this is important, and I'm going to think up some good questions while you're talking. Okay? TV reporters will frequently do it that way, especially local TV, which is okay, because either way, you're delivering your message. Right? Henry Kissinger had a great quote where he would walk in to the media to do a press conference. He would say, ladies and gentlemen of the media, I have all the answers. What are your questions? What he was really saying is, I know all the things I want to tell you, and I'm going to tell them to you. You just got to start asking questions because I already know what I'm going to say. Okay? It's not really a Q&A session. It's a question-response session here. And you kind of answer the question, but you've got your points down that you want to get at. And that's why you got to have those 3 talking points written down. The most important thing you can do. It's hard. I'm going to tell you again, it's hard. But if you go through the process of doing it, it'll pay off like you wouldn't believe. So we talked a little bit about setting the agenda. We talked about crafting our key messages. We crafted those 3 wonderful top-level key messages now. What do you do next? Well, the journalists are going to ask you some things about, well, tell me more about them, or how did you find that, or how do you prove those points that you've just rattled off to me? Well, that's the next level here. You start with some of these things. Remember that a journalist is a storyteller. So they're trying to explain to their audience what it is you're doing. Journalists love facts and figures. Journalists love numbers, because numbers are easy. And when you can throw a couple numbers, now remember the kid drinking out of the fire hose? Don't do that to the journalist. Here comes the pipeline of numbers coming at you. Don't do it. Remember that I told you to pull out that bullet sheet of your top level numbers? You know, hey, this will increase the fish population in the Great Lakes by 42% and help a hemorrhaging fishing industry. Oh, 42%. You know, there's a number. Journalists love that. What you're doing is you're supporting your points. Here's what my research found, and no kidding, here's the impact. Here's some figures on that. Stories. Journalist is a storyteller at heart, right? So they say, well, how did you find this out? Well, we had this bucket, and we were putting dead lampreys in this bucket of water. You know, we carrying it around. Well, then we dumped the water in there, and all of a sudden the live lampreys went crazy. Well, then we said, there's got to be something there. Why are they doing that? You know? So we started to look into this thing and found out that lampreys react negatively to the smell of death of other lampreys. So can we use that as a repellent? That's a great story. And you use that to back up the research. Journalists will love that kind of story. Any anecdote you got, anything like that, they love it. And it helps you tell your bigger story. Kind of summarize it, because a lot of folks have usually heard this when you talk about job interviews and those kind of things. It's your elevator speech. If you ever heard that before, you know, you got to have your elevator speech. You know, tell me about Kent, and I've got 20 seconds to tell you why I'm cool and why you should hire me. Same thing with a journalist. You got 20 seconds to tell me what's this research, what's the impact of my readers, and why is it so cool. Same concept. You got to get it down on paper, or it won't be as smooth as you want it to be. Okay? Remember now, as you're thinking through that message development, don't overdo it. You got to boil it down, because you're trying to use media to reach the masses. So you got to explain this, and you got to use the KISS principle. Okay? Who's heard of the KISS principle? Okay? The KISS principle, not this KISS. This KISS. Keep it super simple. There's another version. There's another version that says stupid in there, but I'm not going to use stupid. Okay? The other version is keep it simple, stupid, but I made it nicer. Okay? All right. Keep it simple. It's like I'm talking to my mom and dad, and I'm trying to explain to them this great piece of research that's being done at MSU. They're not scientists. They're just interested in what's going on at MSU. I have to explain it to them at that level. That's where most of your audience lives, to include your journalists. You don't want to bog down their audience with all this lingo, and the journalists might not understand it. Keep it simple, okay? Now that I've shown you this rather disturbing picture, you will never forget, ever, the KISS principle in your life. Who has ever heard of going through the Q&A drill? Anybody ever hear that? We do this in the PR world all the time. Now, what we'll do is we sit down in preparation for an interview, and we think of all the questions that could be asked. That's first. Just make a list of them. And then we go through, even the better part, all the questions we hope are never asked. Write them down. Now you think about, how am I going to respond if that question happens? In the Bob Newhart clip I showed you, Bob did not do that. He completely caught off guard and unprepared when the hard questions started to come. He had no response. He was prepared. So why does this, why is this important? When you go through the drill, the benefit of going through the drill is actually the process more than the product. Right? Getting those talking points down are going to help you, because as you nug through them and write them and you get them down, it'll help you get them in your head so you have a smoother delivery of them. And that's your place to go back to all the time. The questions and answers, what you'll find is as you list the questions, you'll start to go back and say, okay, do I have a response for number one? What would I say if they asked me that one? Well, that was my first talking point answer, is that one. Good. Second one? Yeah, my other talking point answer, that one. Yep. You'll get down to a couple that might be tricky that you're going to have to come up with something a little different for. But the benefit of that is the thinking through it as you're writing it down. Because now you won't do a Bob Newhart. When the question comes, you'll go, oh, there it is. Response number two. You've already got it in your head, but you're not surprised by the question, and you've already thought about how I'm going to respond to that. Okay? Now, really doesn't happen that much unless you're dealing with more issues things is when they'll come up. But you may get some tough questions about funding that maybe you don't want to talk about or can't talk about yet. Well, there may be issues out there that, the other one that the researchers give is you got to be careful is policy. How does this impact government policy? Well, I'm just doing research. I don't make the policy. If you talk policy, you need to talk about something else. So there are some touchy places there where you may need to think ahead of time, how am I going to handle that if I get that question? The Q&A drill helps do that. Okay. Second one on this slide, make a lasting impression. People by nature, remember the first thing you told them, remember the last thing you told them. Those two become the most memorable pieces, right? So, frequently, journalists will end an interview with, hey, thank you for your time. Do you have anything else to add? How many times I see people, a spokesperson, say, no, that's it, thank you. The journalist just gave you a golden opportunity for a redo, number one, and number two, to leave a lasting impression, especially if it's on television. What should you say when they say, do you have anything else to add? Remember that firstest, most important talking point that you prioritized, that you took all the time to write? Now's the perfect time to serve it up again. Summarize it again. Hey, the research we did here will do this, and here's the impact it could have. You already said that at the beginning. We'll say it again at the end. They just gave you an opportunity. For television, you might do it better the second time, and if you do it cleaner and more smooth, they may use that one instead of the first one. Because they'll pick the best one usually. If it's with the print journalist, you just hit them again with it to remind them, you know that real important thing I told you at the beginning? It is really important, because I just told it to you again. So now you've hit them with it twice, so when they go back to put fingers to keys to start writing a story, just nail them with it twice. That's the most important thing. Don't let that opportunity pass you by. More people let it go, and it's a golden opportunity.